Today I'll be sharing how I've implemented various merchandising techniques to my vendor booth display that can easily be applied to any setup regardless of your product offering and your booth layout. Be sure to watch until the end so you don't miss out on this valuable knowledge, and also hit that subscribe button so we can continue on this vendor market journey together. My name is Adriana, and I've been selling my handmade jewelry at vendor markets for just about a decade now, and my vendor booth display has gone through so many transformations over the years. Besides the compliments I receive on my jewelry, I quite often hear that my setup is clean, it's inviting, and people don't feel overwhelmed by everything that is going on. And now you're probably asking yourself, well, how do I achieve this for my setup? Let's talk about it. The one thing I've learned over time about selling at vendor markets is that there's this expectation for us to create a full retail experience for our customers within a very limited space. And then we're expected to do that every single time we set up at an event. Because ultimately our goal is to attract and engage customers and motivate them to make that purchase. I worked in luxury retail for a number of years. I also had the opportunity to work for a home decor store one summer while working in education, and both were very well known for the way that they displayed and visually merchandised their products. And so while working for that home decor store, I'll admit I absolutely loved looking at their visual merchandising schematics, and even more so when I actually had the opportunity to set the floor myself. I happen to really enjoy fashion. I enjoy working retail. And even more so, I love learning about really the psychology behind what motivates people to spend money. For me, I really love taking what I learned working in retail and applying those various merchandising techniques to my display because it makes money. So I've done just a really quick mock setup of my vendor booth display. I've also included just a few pieces of jewelry just to give you an idea of how I really set things up. So a couple things about my setup is I'm very intentional about staying true to my overall aesthetic. I like to keep things symmetrical, and I like to add texture and just a little bit of color to my space. If you're not familiar with the rule of three, it's just a visual merchandising principle that is used in retail to create a visually appealing and attractive display that ultimately leads to people spending money. And what it does is help create a very balanced display. It's a very simple yet effective method, and I'll show you how I apply that to my display in just a moment. So when creating a vendor booth display, the goal is to teach your customers how to navigate and shop your products. And so you can simply do that by creating various heights and depths to grab your customers' interest without leaving them feeling overwhelmed. Now, like I've said before, I've been selling my handmade jewelry at vendor markets for quite some time. And the one thing it's allowed me to do is observe the way my customers navigate through my space. It has allowed me to then make adjustments as I go. And it's definitely one thing that I absolutely encourage others to do as well. And now going back to the rule of three and how I've applied it to my vendor booth display, I'm going to go ahead and give you a closer look. So going back to how I've applied the rule of three, I look at it as my three main focal points on my table. So on each end, I have earring stands that are anchoring my table. The center, I have these necklace busts that create a center focal point. That next layer down, I have these necklace displays. And then the third layer down is, you can see, well, I have a necklace stand anchoring that one end. I have trays with jewelry on it. And then on the opposite end, I have a bracelet T-bar stand. And notice that I don't have anything sitting directly on my table. Everything has a place. Everything is in some type of tray or in a display. This keeps your space feeling less cluttered. It's easier for your customers to shop and not feel overwhelmed. So what I've tried to achieve here is having items at eye level, and then it allows you to just naturally work your way down and shop my entire table. I also organize my products in collections. Everybody does it a little differently. It might be according to price, perhaps it's color. Ultimately, it's up to you with what works best for your products. So think about your current setup. Are you using varying heights? Do you have products laying directly on your table, or are they in trays and organized? What are some simple adjustments that you can make to create a more engaging and memorable shopping experience for your customers? So, to give you an example of my thought process behind how I set up my vendor booth display, I want you to close your eyes and picture a traditional indoor shopping mall. And now that you have that image in your head, think about how it is set up. And I'm talking malls that are still busy with shoppers in them, because unfortunately, RIP to the traditional shopping malls as we used to know them. But if you're envisioning that traditional shopping mall and the way it's set up, typically you'll have anchor stores on either end of the mall. In the middle of the mall, you might have another larger retailer. You'll have things like your food court, maybe a movie theater, something that entices people to also come to when they're shopping. And then in between those 3 points, you'll see just other little stores strategically sprinkled throughout the mall that keeps you wanting to continue to shop and navigate through the mall. I've actually applied the same concept as a shopping mall to my vendor booth display. So like we talked about, the mall having the 2 anchor stores at either end, I've applied that same concept here. I have my earring display stands anchoring each end of my table. In the center as a focal point, I have these necklace busts. Throughout my table, I have strategically placed other displays that will continue to keep my customers engaged, wanting to see more, with the ultimate goal of spending money. The other thing I try to take into consideration when setting up my vendor booth display is the direction in which customers are walking and what is going to be a focal point for them to draw them in to want to look more. So I've really set it up in a way that regardless of what direction you're coming, you'll see one of 3 of my focal points. So just as an example, if you're walking toward my space in this direction, you'll probably see my earring stand right here. And naturally, your eye is going to just follow the natural landscape of my display. Now, you might also be asking yourself, well, what if the first thing they see is this center display? And oftentimes what I notice is they will start here, they will make their way to one end. A lot of times I have a lot of customers standing in front of my booth, so it's hard to then just walk back through. I'll notice that they walk around, come back to this end, and then end up making their way back through my table one time. And then they spend money, and that's the ultimate goal. So as you think about your setup, what are your observations about how your customers come and shop and navigate through your vendor booth display? Are there products that your customers tend to focus on first? And are those items on displays that are focal points that entice your customers to want to come in, look, and spend money? The other thing I wanted to mention is how I've engaged my customers by using their senses, and I'll show you more of what I'm talking about. Engaging your customers can be accomplished in a number of ways, and that'll really depend on the product that you're selling. So visually, by taste and smell. For me, I tend to go with visuals for obvious reasons, as well as touch. And so for an example, you can kind of see on my table, I have different items. It makes it easy for customers to pick up and touch. A lot of times what I'll do is, for an example, these are my hammered brass earrings. They're my best sellers. Customers love to look at them, pick them up, jingle them around. They observe how lightweight they are. So when I see them do that, I can say, hey, I've got actually a few different sizes. Let me show you those right now. Believe it or not, I was actually very strategic about placing these particular items on one end of the table and then the actual display of those items on the opposite end of the table. And I do that for a number of reasons. One, customers are able to actually physically touch the product, but it also encourages them to then have to navigate through the rest of my booth to look at all my products, to come and actually take a look at the item on the display. Because what I end up doing is when I see that they're interested in those earrings, I say, hey, you know what? I actually have them in a couple different sizes on the display over here. So what they end up doing is looking through my entire table as they walk over and ultimately decide to make a purchase. Same with, for an example, these particular necklaces. They can see them here, but perhaps they want to actually feel them and touch them. On the opposite end of the table, I have them displayed right here. So you get that visual stimulation on that side. You can come over here and actually touch them and see them up close. Being able to actually fully experience the product just gives your customers another reason to want to shop and spend money. Today we've covered a couple of very simple yet useful merchandising techniques that can be applied to any product or layout and will increase sales. So I really encourage you to take the time to think about your display and what you've done to create a space that is easy to navigate for your customers that is ultimately leading to sales. Or perhaps you've watched this video and you're thinking, well, gosh, how can I implement some of these strategies in my display setup? I encourage you to take the time to share your thoughts in the comments because this is such an awesome community that we have here. We're always there to engage, to give feedback, to ask questions, and also just be a support system for one another. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so that we can continue on this vendor market journey together. And because I also sell at outdoor vendor markets like farmers markets, I went ahead and created a video to show you how I set up my pop-up tent, what weights I use, how I hang up my banner from my tent, and also my curtains because that's just a part of my aesthetic. So be sure to check out my other videos so that you can see that process. And as always, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with me to watch this video. And also just for being a part of this community of creative collaborators. I'll see you next time.